Hey, have you ever been bored senseless? Have you ever been in a presentation that you really just felt like crawling under the table and falling asleep? If you're in the blockchain industry, have you ever picked up a white paper from a project and thought, man, this is probably the best cure for insomnia I've ever seen? I hear you. Welcome to this video about cryptopreneurs. Hi, I'm Dennis Lewis, and today I really want to talk to you about something that I feel really strongly about, because it is something I've lived through, I've seen, and it kills so many possibly great projects. But before I do that, I want to talk to you about somebody that was enormously important to me in my life, and that was my grandma. My grandma was a sharp as a tack. She was an amazing person. She died 101 years old and was still winning at bridge with her. A lot of people wouldn't play cards with her because she was too good. And I remember, I have so many great memories of vacations and, with my grandparents and all sorts of fun things. But one of the most really deep down things that I remember about my grandma was that she was an awesome storyteller. And when I mean she was an awesome storyteller, I don't mean that just when we were sitting around a campfire or sitting, playing cards, she would tell great stories, like with the time they were driving down the road and it rained frogs. That's for another day, but it was a true story. No, I'm talking about real storytelling. I'm talking about every Halloween she would dress up as a witch. She had this black pointy hat, and she would go to the elementary schools. I remember when I was in first grade and second grade, but she did this for years and years, and she would tell scary stories. And she didn't, I doubt those stories would be acceptable in today's elementary schools. I mean, I remember hair standing up on the back of my head, my arms. She got into it. But, the thing about that makes those memories so strong and so vivid, it's not the black gown and the black witch's hat and the makeup, and no, it was the stories. It was the way they would get into you, and they would just draw you into to everything that happened. And the reason storytelling is so important is because it's part of human nature. It is part of the fundamental way that human beings are wired. We've been listening to storytellers ever since we've been Homo sapiens, and maybe even before that. That is how we transmit wisdom. That's how we transmit knowledge. That's how we transmit history to our children, to our grandchildren. Go back to Aesop's fables, go back to the Greek tragedies, go back to Shakespeare, go where, it's all about connecting through a story and transmitting an idea that really seeps in on an emotional level. And why am I telling you this about my grandma? Why am I talking about campfires and Shakespeare and, all of these things? Is because we go back to that first question I asked you. Have you ever been bored senseless? And if you've ever felt like that white paper is a cure for insomnia, that it just puts you to sleep. And the reason that happens is because in the tech industry in general, and blockchain especially, we forget to tell the story. Maybe this isn't natural to everybody. Sure, you're talking about complicated technical systems, cryptography, consensus algorithms, sharding, and all of these other things that maybe come into play with whatever you're doing. And all that's great. But the real truth of it is that if it doesn't have a compelling story that gets under your skin, that makes you feel the blood rushing through your veins, then you're missing out on the core ingredient that's going to make your project a success. And don't think that just because you have a technical project, you don't have a story, because you do. You have a story about the problems that you're trying to solve. You have a story about the path you as a founder took to get where you are. You have a story about the way that people's lives will be transformed when they experience the benefits of the project you're growing, you're proposing. And you also have a story about the freedom and the liberty that your investors or your token holders are going to experience when your project is a success. And all of these need to be woven into a story arc that communicates in an effective, emotional way with your audience. I'm not saying that you have to tell ghost stories around a campfire, although you might. But I am saying that you have to weave this and use the techniques and use the ability that I learned from my grandma telling stories to get your point across and to make what you're doing feel important, feel urgent, feel necessary for the people that you're trying to get on board with your project. And that might be investors, it might be token purchasers, it might be clients, it might be vendors. All of these people need to buy into your story. And so I want to ask you today, as a cryptopreneur, how good is your story? Is it a compelling story? Is it, are you creating a vision? Are you seeing those frogs rain out of the sky and bounce off of your windshield? That happened in West Texas one afternoon, and my grandma and my grandpa were in the car. Okay, if you're not using techniques of a storyteller, you're leaving the most powerful part of your project on the table. And that's why people aren't going to look your way. That's why they're not going to be enthusiastic about what you're proposing. So I want you to stop now. This isn't going to be a real long video. It's going to be fairly short. But I want you to think about your story. And if you think there's a good story in there and you want to share it, write me some comments below and reach out. If you're needing help with your story, do the same. Put it in there. Say, hey, my project doesn't have a good story. And I want to come back to the idea that tech projects don't have to be boring. Okay, they don't. I remember a long time ago when I worked for IBM, I did presentations for 400, 500 people at IBM events. And I remember going after, so-and-so or whoever was doing the presentation of the next version of the WebSphere, Portal Manager 6.4.3.2, and they were talking about the newest upgrades and features. And I remember sitting there watching these, nice, engineer, IBM smart people, white shirts, ties, standing up seriously in front of the audience, giving these PowerPoint presentations about the incremental improvements to their project, to their products that they were pitching that day. And I would look out and I would see people snoring. And that's when I realized that they weren't telling stories. And so I would focus my presentations on technical themes around stories and around the way that the new abilities of what we were talking about were going to make people's lives better. They were going to make companies more profitable. They were going to make supply chains more efficient. Whatever it is, tell it in a compelling story. So I know firsthand that you can do this, and I've done it, and I know how powerful it is. So now, stop and think about your story as a cryptopreneur. How can you make it better? You need some help, let me know. But always, always never take your eye off of that story. Put yourself around the campfire. Feel the hairs tingling on the back of your neck as you think about those ghost stories, and then write your own. Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoy this. See you next week.